Hi, welcome back to the channel. If you've been following my videos recently, you'll know that I posted one that I called Not Long to Live. And that video's done exceptionally well, it's very popular. And I've had a lot of comments from people about it. And I think it's really touched a nerve, and I thought I would make another one along the same lines. And as you can see, it's not raining today. Last time I came out, it was absolutely battering down. So I thought I'd come for a walk in the woods and just talk to you about what I'm thinking about in terms of life. So, as I mentioned in the last video, life expectancy for a man in the UK is currently 79. Now, I know that that's from birth, so it doesn't really count once you're my age. So you need to readjust and change all the numbers. Sorry, it's a bit lower than I expected, all of these trees. But if I was going to live to 79, I can tell you now, and this might be a surprise to some of you, my age, I'm currently 57. So hopefully that's a surprise to all of you, but probably get loads of comments from people saying, 57, I thought you were 67. So if I was going to live to 79, which is the average life expectancy, that would mean that I've got another 22 years left, which sounds like a lot of time. But actually, is it? How many days is that? So if you do the calculation, 22 years is around about 8,000 days. 8,000 days doesn't sound like a lot, does it? And if you work it out in terms of how many weekends that is, well, it's about 1,156 weekends. So that's starting to feel not long enough. And if I'm thinking about it in terms of Christmas and summer, then that would be 22 Christmases, 22 summers. That doesn't sound like much at all. And actually, will I live to 79? Is that realistic? Well, I certainly know a lot of people who haven't lived to 79. In fact, I'm hearing about it every single day. And I mentioned in the last video that a few friends of mine have had health problems. And, you know, I've had friends who've died, and, you know, we're not guaranteed to make it all the way through to 79. I'm pretty healthy. Hopefully I will. Maybe I'll even beat 79, but there's no guarantee of that. And I was just thinking the other day, I was watching some sport. And one of the interesting things in a sports match is that quite often, if your team is losing, in the last sort of 5 or 10 minutes of the match, they really put a big effort in, and they make, you know, they really push to try and score, and then they might score and they might even win. And you think, wow, why didn't they play like that for the whole of the match? Sorry, there's a fallen tree here that I've got to climb over, so let me just get over that. I don't want to fall over. That would be a bit embarrassing on camera to go face planting into all of this mud. Yeah, you think, why didn't they play like that for the whole match? It was great that they put the effort in the last 10 minutes, or maybe they even scored in overtime, but, you know, why didn't they just start the match like that? And the reason I'm mentioning that is that there's an analogy to your life there, that there's no point waiting until the end of your life to do all of your good things. And I think that's what a lot of us fall into, that trap, that we work hard, and you're sometimes tired after work, and you think, oh, I can't wait until I can retire, and then I can do all the things that I've always wanted to do, which is a bit like your sports team waiting until overtime to really put the effort in and try and score. But sometimes it's too late. You know, sometimes even though you do put that effort in, your team doesn't score. It doesn't actually pull off the miraculous result. And that might happen to you. If you wait until retirement to do all the things that you want to do, you might find that you've left it a bit too late, and that you should have done it in the first half, or, you know, the second half, or whatever time it was. So there's no point putting everything off until retirement, because firstly, you might not get there. You know, you might die. Sorry, it's really muddy there. I'm going to have to turn around and go back the other way. You might not get to retirement, but also there's an element of a peaking in terms of your health. So interestingly, health and wealth don't tend to peak at the same time. So if you look at your wealth, most people, their wealth builds through their life, and then they get to a point where, you know, you're feeling like you've got an element of comfort, you've got some money. Does that coincide with the time when you've got most energy to do things? Well, unfortunately not. You've got the most energy to do things younger in life, and you're more likely to be better off wealth-wise later in life. So really, you need to find a balance between those two things, that ideally you want some wealth whilst you've still got a lot of health, because I can tell you the old adage of, health is wealth is absolutely true, because once your health starts to deteriorate, if you get to the situation where you're unwell, or you're not fit, or you're not mobile, or you've got mental incapacity, well, that's pretty much, it's difficult to do all the things that you've always wanted to do at that stage. So you might have some wealth, you might have the money to do it, but if you're not able to do it, if you're not actually physically able or mentally able to do things, then it's too late at that point. And I just wanted to share with you one of my close friends, who I was very close to in my 20s and 30s and 40s. And so I spent a lot of time. We had some great times. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed around about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a few more now. It's funny how time passes so quickly. He was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia, which is the same as Bruce Willis, if you've been following his problems. So it's a form of dementia where your communication is impacted first, and then you have a whole load of other issues. And unfortunately, his wife has now become his full-time carer, and he's only just turning 60. And he's been like that for a few years. So unfortunately, his health has deteriorated well before his wealth did. And he was at that stage where he was looking to retire, wanted to move to Italy, and unfortunately not able to do any of those things anymore. Very sad. So I just wanted to share that story with you, because there's a danger for all of us that could happen at any time. It could happen next week, next month, next year. Who knows what might come around the corner. So I really wanted to make this video as a wake-up call. It's a positive message. I'm not trying to be too negative and just sort of say, oh, everything's doom and gloom and I've only got 8,000 days left and woe is me. It's really to remind you that you need to do stuff now. Try and change things up, do things differently. So it doesn't have to be anything spectacular. So as an example, I will share with you what I've been doing recently. So as you know, I make a lot of YouTube videos, and most of those videos are in the Joe Blog studio. So it's me just looking at a computer screen, talking to camera, mostly talking about Russia, a bit about China, a few other countries, the USA recently. But I decided that life was too short to just keep doing that. And whilst it's interesting to a point, it's not extremely entertaining. So that's why I started making my food videos. And those food videos, I've been going to lunch with various people. Now, I'm fortunate enough that my mum is still alive. So she was quite young when she had me, and she's pretty fit and healthy still. So I've been meeting her on a regular basis for some of the lunches. So she's been performing the cameraman duties on some of those videos. And I've met some other people, some friends, some family. And it's a really good way of, firstly, getting out, forcing myself out of the Joe Blog studio. Secondly, seeing some nice places to eat and experiencing some interesting cuisine. And then thirdly, socialising and doing things. So that's a good example, I think, of what I've done recently to change things up, to make sure that I don't have those regrets where I suddenly wake up one day and think, why haven't I been doing anything interesting? Why have I just been sitting here working the whole time, waiting for my retirement? And then one day I wake up and I'm dead and it's too late. So I wanted to make this video really just to remind you that, life is finite. We're not here forever. You only have a limited amount of time on the planet. It's really muddy where I'm walking, so that's why I'd slowed down a bit, because I don't want to slip over here. Let me just jump over that big puddle. Life is finite. Nobody knows how long they've got left. I mean, we might have a long time, and we might just have, a handful of days left, and, we really don't know. So if you've been putting something off thinking, oh, maybe I'll do that next year or next week or next month or whatever it might be, then why don't you just think about doing it tomorrow or even tonight? Or, if it's something simple like you haven't spoken to one of your family for a while, maybe, for whatever reason, time just slips by, they're too busy, you're too busy, maybe had an argument, something like that. Well, put all that to one side and just make that phone call, send an email, send a WhatsApp, you know, whatever it might be, Snapchat even. Don't think anybody watching this video is on Snapchat, but thought I'd throw it in there because it makes me look young and cool and trendy. But you know, the point is, do something different today or tomorrow or this week or next week, but soon, not next month. Next month is too late. Do it soon. Do something different. Maybe go somewhere different for lunch. Maybe go out for dinner. Maybe just change things up. Try eating vegetarian for a week, or go and see one of your family that you haven't seen for a long time. Go to a sports match. Go to a concert. Go to a theatre showing. Go and do something different. Go to a different pub. Whatever it might be, doesn't really matter. Just do something different, that when somebody says to you, what have you been doing this week? And you don't have to say, you know, the usual stuff, all the same things. You haven't really done anything interesting. Stop doing that. Do something interesting. Why not? What is stopping you doing something interesting? That might be financially, you can't afford to do anything interesting, but you don't have to spend money on anything. Do what I'm doing here. Look, I've come to the woods, come for a nice walk. It's a bit muddy, so I'm having to avoid all the big splurges of mud everywhere. But it's quite nice to just be out and about. It's pretty cold today. The UK is having some terrible weather at the moment, so it's been raining a lot. That's why it's so muddy on the floor. But I've got my gloves on to keep me nice and warm. And it's quite refreshing, quite energising to be out and about, just wandering about. I mean, I'm talking to you at the moment, which is quite nice. But I'm reminding myself that if I've only got 8,000 days left, or maybe even less than that, you know, 8,000 would be me hitting average life expectancy. There's no guarantee of that. But if I've only got 8,000 days left, then I could probably only come here 8,000 more times. Now that sounds like a lot, obviously, but that would mean I wouldn't do anything else. But if I'm working backwards of how many times I can do this and that and all the rest of it, it starts getting a little bit scary. Now, if you're older than me, then you know you on paper have got less time than me. So it's more important that you do something memorable, do something fun, do something people will want to talk to you about. So yeah, I just wanted to make this video really to follow up on the last video to say life is short, it is finite, we don't have a guaranteed amount of time here. Make the most of it, enjoy yourself, do some stuff that you like doing, because there's no point sitting there moaning all the time and complaining and thinking, well, nothing ever happens to me and I don't really get to do anything, because you know, you're in control of your life, and if you're fit and healthy and you can afford to do things, then you need to start doing more things before it is too late, because once it's too late, it's absolutely game over. You know, people who talk about you in the past tense. I recently got an email. I used to do a lot of advisory work, helping companies to raise money, and I did a deal around about 4 or 5 years ago, and one of the people who invested was this really interesting guy. He was 87 years of age, and had quite a few meetings with him, video meetings, and yeah, it was fun. He was interesting. He was an ex-lawyer. He'd retired. He was really interested in startup businesses. So he invested, and unfortunately, I got notification the other day, I got sent his death certificate. So he'd made it through to 93, so you know, he'd done okay. But you know, that's it now. It's game over for him, and I think he enjoyed himself. He had a good time. But you know, it just makes you realise that we're all going to have one of those death certificates one day, and you're going to make sure that you've done everything that you really want to do before somebody signs that on your behalf. So hopefully that's an uplifting message to leave you with. It's not meant to be morbid, meant to be uplifting, because once you realise that you're going into the last 10 minutes of the sports match, or you're even in overtime on the sports match, that's the time to put the effort in. That's the time when you raise your game and come up with your best performance. So that's the challenge that I'm leaving for you, to basically raise your game, do something different this week, and I will see you again on the next video. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so, and I'll see you soon.